Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us this morning at this Post-COP23 Hong Kong Forum. I'm very honored to be asked to open this forum on behalf of our three co-hosts, the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, the Business Environment Council, and Civic Exchange. And to start, I'd just like to say a special thank you to HKUST for providing us this wonderful venue and refreshment so that we could bring you this forum free of charge. And to the very hardworking people behind the scene, Robert Gibson, Michelle Wong, and Professor Jimmy Fong, and your team at the UST, and also Maya D'Souza and her team at the BEC, and of course my colleagues, Michelle Weldon, Joyce Lau, and our team at the Civic Exchange. Thank you very much for the tremendous efforts that you put in putting together such a well thought out program for today. And of course to our speakers who have joined us this morning to share their expert knowledge, their thoughts and vision. And of course, I think you are aware that the UN Climate Conference 2017, COP23, meaning the Conference of Parties, the 23rd Conference of Parties, took place recently at Bonn, Germany. This global conference of world leaders is significant in sort of keeping the world up to date to where we are at by the global efforts of the 197 signatories to the Paris Agreement, basically to keep global warming to 2 degrees centigrade. Now the aim is to protect the world from dangerous warming that cause sea level rise and extreme weather, and the risk and the vulnerability to human life. This is actually a major issue affecting everyone on this planet. So I'm very glad that you are here today recognizing this importance and joining us in this dialogue. Today, in this forum, we shall have 2 panels. One looking at providing an overview of the UN COP progress, and the other looking at action by business. Both of the panels would be addressing 2 key questions. What progress has been made in the 2 years since the Paris Agreement made in November 2015, and what will the current action deliver the low-carbon, climate-resilient global economy that we need? Now, to provide context for our discussion today, I shall quickly summarize what climate science is telling us as to what is required, and what the UN Environment Programme's GAP report is telling us as to what is happening. And then I'll pass the floor to the panels to lead discussion on what are we going to do to fill the gap. So what is the science telling us? Well, thank you, Robert, for putting together this very helpful slides. Taking an example, the USA's 4th National Climate Assessment report in November 2017, over the past 115 years, global temperature has in fact increased by 1 degree Celsius, and sea level rise by 8 cm since 1900. CO2 now is bigger than 400 ppm parts per million, and this period is now at the warmest in the history of modern civilization. It is extremely likely that human activity like greenhouse gas emission are dominant cause. There are a lot of studies that show us that. There is a prediction of a further 1.4 degrees Celsius increase by 2050, and a further increase in sea level rise to 1.2 meter and possibly to 2.4 by 2100. there will be lots of snowpack and extreme weather events increasing, like heavy rains, droughts, heat waves, and forest fires, which we have already experienced in recent years. What is needed to note is that a small increase in average temperature will actually disproportionately increase the incidence of extreme weather. Taking the UK Grantham Institute of Climate Change study as a further example, this slide shows impact in 2100 with no mitigation or business as usual. We will see that there will be billions of people with increased water scarcity. Millions of people per year will be affected by river flooding. 50% of plant species would lose half habitat, and 60% of cropland less suitable for agriculture. Now, this would significantly impact, food and the food chain for humankind. Also, 10 to 12 billion person would expose to heat waves per year, probably twice a year. Now, when we talk about 10 to 12 billion, that means, basically everyone. So you may think that 2100 is a long way away, but if you think further, all our children and grandchildren who are born today may live to that day to experience those hardship and pain we shall leave them. As far as sea level rise is concerned, while there is uncertainty on how rapidly the ice sheets might melt, causing sea level rise, but what is much less uncertain is the eventual melting. And the eventual sea level rise for a 2 degrees Celsius increase in temperature, albeit that for a prolonged period of time, is estimated to be about 29 meters. Well, when you measure it, it's about 8 to 9 story building. And this will have a profound impact on highly developed cities like Tianjin, Shanghai, and we're here in Hong Kong. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is preparing its 6th overall assessment report. And as part of this, there will be 3 special reports coming out in 2018-19 on the impact of global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius, and the second report on the ocean and crystal sphere, basically this meaning frozen parts of the planet in a changing climate. And also on climate change, desertification, land degradation, food security, greenhouse gas fluxes in terrestrial ecosystems. This will give us, all this report will give us wider and deeper understanding of the future impacts. These graphs are taken from the UN Environment Program Emissions Gap Report, which was published in October 2017. This shows that on the left, we have total greenhouse gas emission, that's including methane and nitrous oxide from land use and potent gases released from industry. On the right, we have the emissions of carbon dioxide. Now, while growth in the last 3 years has slowed encouragingly, 2017, regretfully, is forecast to have a 2% increase on 2016. The UNEP's emission gap report then goes on to look at the difference between the current trends in greenhouse gas emissions and the pathways needed to keep temperature increase to 2 degrees Celsius to 1.5 degrees Celsius. As this graph shows us, a radical change is needed. The gap is so significant, as you will see. So even if all the Paris commitments are met, it will probably not be enough to keep global warming within a safe level. There is a further graph to tell you, the gap in terms of gigaton CO2 emission. From this graph, you see we probably need to have a further reduction, even after all these commitments are met, of 13.5 to get us to the below the 2 degrees Celsius level. This is a daunting task. And a key point that we need to note is that conventional abatement technologies will not be sufficient. Achieving a better than 66% of keeping temperature increase to 2 degrees by 2100 will require us to to have CO2 capture and storage and CO2 removal technologies. It is a big mountain to climb. Investment in innovation and climate-smart technology today is absolutely necessary to reverse the trend. So this would present to us the biggest single challenge to humankind in the generations to come. On this note, I shall pass the floor to our first panel of experts to further discuss on the how to close the gap. And I have pleasure in inviting Robert Gibson, who will be moderator for our first panel, to introduce his speakers. Robert is Hong Kong UST's adjunct professor. He is also a fellow of the Civic Exchange and have worked closely with the Civic Exchange for many years as his senior advisor. I also personally known Robert for many years. We share the same profession as chartered accountants, and for many years we worked together in developing financial and integrated reporting standards for Hong Kong. So Robert, your floor. Thanks.